Argentina's Vice President Cristina Fernandez accused the representatives of the Public Prosecutor's Office of manipulating the investigation process in the Vialidad case against her. In Colombia, at least 23 armed groups confirmed talks with the government to join total peace policy. In Palestine, the number of young people killed by the Israeli occupation forces in the last 24 hours rose to 5, a new day of violence coinciding with the commemorations for the International Day of Solidarity with the Palestinian people. Hello, welcome to From the South. I'm Luis Alberto Matos from the teleSUR studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. Argentina's Vice President Cristina Fernandez offered her last statements in the trial for the so-called Vialidad case, in which she accused the representatives of the Public Prosecutor's Office of manipulating the investigation process. The challenges of the Vice President Fernandez were made during her intervention in the last part of the trial against her, called Last Words, where the accused are given the opportunity to express themselves for the last time in the process. Cristina Fernandez accused the representatives of the Public Prosecutor's Office of misrepresenting information in such a way that this created the conditions to carry out an attempt against her. Fernandez also described the court and the prosecutor's office as a real firing squad.
It was December 2nd, 2019, when I first spoke before this court. I said it was the lawfare court, after all that we went through, and in particular what I went through. I must say that this is more than a lawfare court. I was very generous, I think. In fact, it is a real firing squad. This court is a firing squad.
Vice President Cristina Fernandez added that the court in charge of the trial of the so-called Vialidad case seeks to stigmatize the political spaces and their leaders.
This sort of firing squad has the purpose of stigmatizing, from the beginning, a political space and fundamentally the one who has the highest representation of that space. Not because it occurs to me, but because fundamentally the votes. The elections decided to give me that place. In the political parties, the places are won with votes, fundamentally.
On Tuesday, Mexico's Chamber of Deputies voted on the ruling of the electoral reform. The resolution was approved with 62 votes in favor and 48 against, and was therefore handed over to the Board of Directors to advance to the plenary to be approved by a qualified majority. Since it is a constitutional reform, the bill requires a qualified majority of 2/3, equivalent to 334 out of the 500 deputies. Among the most important points are the creation of the National Institute of Elections and Consultations instead of the National Electoral Institute, to reduce the number of electoral councillors who would be elected by popular vote, and to reduce the number of federal deputies and senators. At least 23 armed groups in Colombia have publicly confirmed their intention to initiate talks with the government to join in total peace. An investigation presented by the Institute for Development and Peace Studies indicates that the country's armed groups accepted the call made by President Gustavo Petro to accept legal benefits in exchange for a ceasefire. In the past, added that at least 10 other groups announced a unilateral ceasefire, according to Peace Commissioner Danilo Rueda. He also highlighted that several armed structures have shown their willingness to negotiate with narco-paramilitary groups such as the Gaitanista self-defense groups of Colombia and the Pacheli, in order to bring the necessary peace to the country's communities. The President of Peru, Pedro Castillo, completed an intense agenda in Chile, where he participated in the 4th binational meeting to promote cooperation between the two countries. The Peruvian President was received by his Chilean counterpart, Gabriel Boric, at the Palacio de la Moneda. The activities of both heads of states began around 10:30 a.m. local time as they laid flowers at the monument to Bernardo O'Higgins, located in the Plaza de la Ciudadanía. Boric and Castillo held a meeting to review the bilateral agenda. Later, they opened the 4th binational cabinet, the main forum for political and diplomatic dialogue between the two countries. In Chile, Héctor Yaitul, leader of the Arauco-Mayeco Coordinating Committee, joined the 5 Mapuche community members in pre-trial detention who began a hunger strike. The striking Mapuches are protesting against their transfer from La Araucanía to the Valdivia Penitentiary, emphasizing the authorities violated their rights and aggravated their pre-trial detention in a breach of due process. In a public statement, the Mapuche leaders announced to be on liquid hunger strike and promised to take the action to the last consequences. They are demanding to be transferred to the Mapuche political prisoners module of the Temuco prison, where only Mapuche prisoners are held. At a press briefing in Beijing on Tuesday, Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesman Zhao Lijian stated his government gladdens to see the resumption of dialogue between the government and opposition groups in Venezuela and a political resolution reached at an early date.
Of dialogue between the government and opposition groups in Venezuela and hopes that the two sides can meet each other halfway and reach a political solution at an early date. We always firmly uphold the uncharted and basic norms governing international relations and believe that the Venezuelan issue should be resolved by the Venezuelan people through dialogue and consultation within the framework of their constitution and laws. China reiterates that it opposes interference in other countries' internal affairs, unilateral sanctions, and so-called long-arm jurisdiction. Facts have proved that sanctions and suppression are unpopular and can only worsen the economic situation and people's livelihood in Venezuela. We call on relevant countries to stop interfering in Venezuela's internal affairs as soon as possible, lift unilateral sanctions, and contribute more positive energy to the peace, stability, and development of Venezuela.
The president-elect of Brazil, Luiz Inácio da Silva, demanded the release of journalist Julian Assange after meeting with WikiLeaks board. The president stated that after meeting with the editor-in-chief of the international media platform, Christine Crafton, and the editor Joseph Farrell, the health situation and the fight for the freedom of Julian Assange were reported. Lula da Silva asked them to send the journalist their solidarity and demanded that he be released from his unjust imprisonment. This happens in the framework of the WikiLeaks leaders' international agenda in several Latin American countries to seek progressive governments to pressure the United States authorities to lift the charges against the Australian journalist. Brazilian President-elect Luiz Inácio da Silva will define the proposed constitutional amendment of the Bolsa Familia, a social assistance program that he intends to strengthen starting in 2023. In the budget proposal sent by the government of President Jair Bolsonaro to the Congress for 2023, the Auxílio Brasil plan, which replaced the Bolsa Familia, had an average value of 400 reais, which translates into $76 for the beneficiaries. However, President-elect Lula da Silva intends to release 600 reais or more than $100 for the beneficiaries, with more than 150 reais or $28 for each child up to 6 years of age. The incoming administration also intends to approve the proposed constitutional amendment of Bolsa Familia and raise the cap on public spending to 19% of the gross domestic product. Let's take a short break, but first remember you can follow us on TikTok at the account at teleSUR English, in which you'll be able to see news in different formats, news updates, and much more. All the stories coming up. Stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. Russian President Vladimir Putin described the relations with China as positive and called for a rise and deepening of the bilateral relations in the field of energy as rising. The Russian president stressed that a high level of bilateral ties in the energy sector and large-scale joint projects for nuclear power plants in China has been achieved recently. He also pointed out that Moscow increased its turnover by 64% since the beginning of the year and the amount of supplies by 10%. In this regard, President Xi Jinping added that energy cooperation between the two countries is the cornerstone that serves as an effective force to protect global energy security. China's foreign ministry on Tuesday said Beijing firmly opposed the British Prime Minister's remarks as Rishi Sunak warned that the Asian giant posed a systematic challenge to the United Kingdom values and interests.
The relevant remarks from British side ignore and distort the facts, violently interfere in China's internal affairs, and China firmly opposes this. China is a country with rule of law. Every legitimate right and freedom enjoyed by Chinese citizens is fully protected under the law. At the same time, any right and freedom must be exercised with the framework of the law.
European Central Bank President Christine Lagarde reiterated the central bank's determination to fight record-high inflation, noting the institution will continue to raise interest rates even as the economy weakens. Lagarde stated before the European Parliament at a meeting on monetary policy that the inflation of the Eurozone had not yet peaked because of too much uncertainties. The former managing director of the International Monetary Fund added that affected by tighter financial conditions and weak global demands, the economy of the Eurozone was expected to continue to weaken for the rest of this year and early next year. According to the European Union's Statistics Office, the inflation of the Eurozone hit a record high of 10.6% in October. Rocketing energy bills are forcing Hungary to close libraries, theaters, swimming pools, and even its new football stadiums for winter. The state-of-the-art grounds are among a long list of buildings no longer able to cope with rising energy prices in the Central European country. Despite being one of the country's richest cities, Székesfehérvár is one of many closing its museums, libraries, and theaters. According to experts, other cities, particularly in the poorer eastern regions, are threatened with bankruptcy unless they get state support. The energy crisis and effect from the conflict in Ukraine has put pressure on Prime Minister Viktor Orban, who has made low household utility bills a core policy of the last decade.
If we carry out these measures, which are not for fun but unavoidable, then I think the local government and its institutions and public service can be profitable. We can protect workplaces and pay wage, but if this high energy price remain, especially long term, then there will be municipalities that do not have enough income to compensate the increase of energy prices.
The 17th session of the United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization Intergovernmental Committee for the Safeguarding of the Intangible Cultural Heritage started in the Moroccan capital Rabat. Delegates from 180 countries attended the session, which ran from November 28th to December 3rd. During the session, the committee evaluated over 50 nominations submitted by state parties for inscription on the list of the convention, including traditional tea processing techniques and associated social practices in China. In a total of 66 applications for inscription, 46 requests are concerning on the representative list of the intangible cultural heritage of humanity, 4 application requests for the inscription on the list of urgent safeguarding, and 5 others are nominated to the register of good safeguarding practice. China said Tuesday would speed up a push to vaccinate people aged 60 and older against COVID-19 after the country registered record daily case numbers in recent days. Beijing's National Health Commission pledged to accelerate the increase in the vaccination rate for people over the age of 80 and continue to increase the vaccination rate for people aged 60 to 79. The NHC also said it would establish a special working group to make special arrangements for the vaccination of the elderly against COVID. NHC officials said during a press conference that just 65.8% of people over 80 are fully vaccinated. China registered more than 38,000 domestic infections Tuesday, slightly down from record highs seen over the weekend.
In the next step, we will conscientiously implement the requirements of a plan, guide the organization and development of various regions, optimize vaccination services, and work hard in promoting the COVID-19 booster shots and the vaccination of the elderly. We need to speed up the COVID-19 vaccination, especially for the elderly. We hope that elderly could actively complete the vaccination as soon as possible to protect their own health and that of their families.
According to the Center for Systems Science and Engineering at Johns Hopkins University, the United States has registered over 98.62 million confirmed COVID-19 cases nationwide, with a death toll approaching 1.08 million people. Specifically, the country's case count number over 98 million people, with related deaths reaching more than 1 million as of Monday. New Omicron subvariants BQ1 and BQ1.1 accounted for over half of new COVID-19 cases in the country in the past week, following the latest estimates of the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Thanksgiving holiday gatherings have amped up the spread of viruses such as coronavirus, flu, and respiratory syncytial virus, as both the latter are at high levels for this time of year. U.S. top infectious diseases expert Anthony Fauci warned RSV could become public health emergency in the nation. We have more news coming up after a final short break, so don't go away. Welcome back from the south. Israeli occupying forces shot and killed 5 Palestinians on Tuesday. Israel has killed 158 Palestinians in the occupied territories so far this year. The Palestinian Health Ministry also reported that another Palestinian citizen was shot in the head and killed during a crackdown by Israeli soldiers in Beit Umar town. 9 other citizens were wounded after being shot with live ammunition. November 29th is the International Day of Solidarity with the Palestinian people. Violence and violation of human rights. The Organization for the Liberation of Palestine recalled that 45 years ago, the UN established the International Day of Solidarity with the Palestinian people with the objective of carrying out actions of peaceful coexistence. However, Israel has deepened the violation of human rights that continues to be a daily reality. The Palestinian factions maintain since then that the Israeli occupation maneuver aims at a total expulsion of the Palestinians from their legitimate territories. On this date, they also commemorate the 75th anniversary of the partition of Palestine following the adoption of a UN resolution creating 2 separate states. On this day, the president of Venezuela, Nicolás Maduro, wrote on his Twitter account, "In Venezuela, we are faithful defenders of the cause of freedom and justice that the Palestinian people demands and deserve. Today, we ratify from the deepest Bolivarian spirit our unwavering solidarity. Palestine has the right to peace and self-determination." In this regard, the Bolivian head of state, Luis Arce, stated on the International Day of Solidarity with the Palestinian people, "We ratify our unwavering commitment to their struggle for their right to self-determination, and we strongly condemn the permanent and disproportionate violence inflicted on their territory." Finally, Cuban Foreign Minister Bruno Rodriguez wrote the following: "Cuba reaffirms its unwavering support for a just, comprehensive, and lasting solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict that guarantees the people of Palestine their inalienable right to a state within the pre-1967 borders with East Jerusalem as its capital." China's permanent representative to the United Nations, Sang Jun, called for efforts to achieve common security between Israelis and Palestinians.
The Council must, with a sense of urgency, take substantive steps to advance to the 2-state solution and support the Palestinian people in restoring and exercising their inalienable rights. On issues concerning the future and fate of the Palestinian people, no one has the right to veto.
On Tuesday, the last matches of the group stage in Group A of the FIFA World Cup Qatar 2022 took place. The match between Ecuador and Senegal defined which team would be in the round of 16. A draw was enough for the South American team to go through, but the current African champions had other plans. Senegal took the lead with a penalty scored by Ismail Assar in the 44th minute. In the second half, Ecuador tried and got the equalizer with a goal by Moises Caicedo, but only 3 minutes later, Senegal's captain Kalidou Koulibaly put his team ahead again. In this way, Senegal qualified as second in Group A. The Clockwork Orange defeated Tuesday the host Qatar 2-0 in a match that defined the qualification to the round of 16 in the third day of the World Cup Group A. The Dutch attack was well marked from the first minutes, dominating the match while the Qataris did what they could every time they touched the ball, although without success in the plays. Thus, Cody Gakpo opened the scoreboard and Frankie de Jong sealed the victory for the Europeans, who finished ahead of Senegal in the Group A standings. The Browns leave the tournament with a bittersweet taste after their debut in the world's top football competition, for which they train with great expectations. England booked a World Cup last 16 clash against Senegal as Marcus Rashford and Phil Foden inspired a 3-0 win against Wales that sends their neighbours out of the tournament. Rashford scored twice to move into a group of 4 players, labelled on 3 goals in the race for the Golden Boot. Phil Foden was also on target as the Three Lions set up a last 16 clash with Senegal on Sunday. England are the tournament's top scorers with 9 goals despite drawing their second group game against the United States. And as the hearts of millions of fans live the emotions of the Qatar 2022 World Cup, teleSUR joins this sporting event with From the Field, a show that brings news, analysis, reviews, and more to our audience. Don't miss it. Our show airs at 1 p.m. local time in Caracas and 12 p.m. New York. Remember, From the Field, only on teleSUR. We have come to the end of this news brief, where you can find these and many other stories on our website, telesurenglish.net. You can also join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For teleSUR English, I'm Luis Alberto Matos. Thank you for watching.